Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. Welcome to my second part of my reply to Doofland, two feminists who are reviewing the Red Pill movie, a movie that they haven't bothered to watch. One couldn't even make it through the full trailer, but at the same time they're claiming to be open-minded and fair and critical thinkers. What could go wrong?
Yeah,
because we're trying to fight for you guys, you idiots.
Yeah, and just by the way, for everyone out there, feminism does not mean hating men, you know, or wishing the death of all men. There's a fucking separate word for that. It's called misandry. Fucking use it.
Well, instead of telling us that, maybe you should speak to your fellow feminists, because a lot of them don't even think that a misandry is a realistic concept. They don't believe that you can actually hate men. And many of the ones who do believe that misandry is a legitimate thing think it's perfectly okay to do so, because they see men as the evil oppressors. And it's perfectly fine to take a shit all over the evil oppressors. I mean, and that's not mentioning articles like this one from earlier this month, which is called "I'm Done Pretending Men Are Safe, Even My Sons." It reads, "I have two sons. They are strong and compassionate, the kind of boys other parents are glad to meet when their daughters bring them home for dinner. They are good boys, in the ways good boys are, but they are not safe boys. I'm starting to believe there is no such thing." So the whole premise of this article is men are dangerous, men are evil, even her two sons are bad and evil people. And this really is the cornerstone of feminist ideology. Men are the aggressors, men are the oppressors, men are the fault of all the problems in the world. They're the cause, they're to blame. And women are always innocent, always victims, always the oppressed. That sounds pretty hateful to me. In fact, in part one of this reply series, Doofland said a very similar thing, where they said it's the fault of men of yore. The men of the past have caused all the problems. Not society, not men and women, but men. But somehow that's not hateful, right? Really? I mean, I've heard racists before claim that the Jews or the blacks or whoever are the cause of all the problems in the world. That's clearly hateful. But when another group does it to men, for some reason it's not. Very strange. Very strange.
It doesn't exist in praxis. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
Do you see, like, any matriarchal society systematically oppressing men anywhere? I don't think so.
And the very few that do exist, which they do, but it's a minority groups in indigenous cultures, they're not killing the men at all. You know,
we're not like
they're actually
accusing them of being sluts. I mean,
they're not raping men and accusing them of being sluts. Okay, so she's basically saying that's what patriarchal societies do to women, right? The men go out and rape the women and then call them sluts, right? That doesn't sound hateful towards men at all. I mean, of course, she ignores the fact that in this patriarchal society of ours, if a man is forced to penetrate a woman, it's not considered rape, it's considered sexual assault. And those numbers are pretty fucking high if you look at the statistics from the CDC. It's kind of strange considering the patriarchal society is meant to benefit men and oppress women, yet it doesn't even recognise males who have been raped by women. And that's systematic too. That's the legal system. Males can't be raped by women in England either. It's not in the legal definition. And it was even prevented from becoming part of the legal definition in Israel by feminist groups. None of these countries are matriarchies, by the way. I'm sure you think they're all patriarchies, but none of them are matriarchies. Next.
That's a whole other thing. But I guess, you know, we get really worked up when we talk about men's rights activism, because it's like, don't you see that feminism and men's rights activism are basically fighting for the same thing?
Okay, even if you make the assumption that MRAs and feminists have the same goals, that does not mean they have the same methods. Now, I would argue that most feminists do not have the same goals as most MRAs. If you want to reduce both sides down to the most simplistic argument possible, then yes, both sides want equality. But because feminists see women as the oppressed group and men as the oppressor group, they tend to ignore men's issues, excuse them away, diminish them, dismiss them, while focusing not only on legitimate female issues, but trivial ones as well. This is not true equality. Not to mention also trying to increase advantages that women already have over men, like in sentencing. When it comes to prison sentencing, women are the privileged group, yet we still have feminist groups trying to make them even more privileged. This is not equality. So no, I disagree that we want the same thing when you get into the details of it. And our methods and worldview are most definitely different. Now that doesn't mean that we can't work with some reasonable feminists on some issues. There are some things we agree on, some things we can work on, but generally speaking, different worldviews, different methods, different goals. And considering feminists spend so much fucking time shitting all over us, spreading lies and misinformation about us, I have to ask, why would we want to work with you?
But for some unknown reason to me, really, you know, you're all just there going, oh, but you hate us, you're fighting against us. It's like, no.
No? Really? This is a review of The Red Pill, right? A movie which was shut down numerous times in Australia by people who hadn't seen it and spread lies and misinformation about it. But feminists love us, apparently, right? What, the same feminists who have shut down university talks about men's issues? Or what about the ones in the media who constantly falsely associate us with serial killers who have no connection to us? Or the pickup artists? Or random trolls on Twitter? Or anyone else they don't fucking like? They just randomly label all of them MRAs without any evidence or proof in an attempt to spread anti-MRA propaganda. There's really no other word for it. But we're supposed to believe that you're all friendly and don't have any hard feelings against us. Wow. You're either extremely ignorant or a liar.
I mean, okay, so the film apparently discusses things like, you know, male suicide rates. Okay, that's something important to feminists as well.
Oh, really? That's important to feminists as well, really? That's why every single time an MRA brings up male suicide numbers, the automatic answer we get from feminists is, but women attempt it more. Now, there are two reasons why this is a very, very poor argument to make when responding to the male suicide numbers. First of all, it's comparing people who have actually died to people who haven't, and saying the ones who haven't died somehow have it worse. That's not really a fair comparison, is it? And second of all, the statistic is actually wrong. Now, it is true that more women self-harm than men, but the self-harm stats aren't broken down into suicide attempts and non-suicide attempts. So we don't know the actual numbers. So we can't actually say more women attempt suicide. Yet this argument is constantly used by feminists. Cassie J has even mentioned before that, you know, she ran across it numerous times. And it's so widely spread. This myth is so widely spread that I even hear non-feminists using it. And it's just a derailing tool. It's just a way to stop the conversation about a predominantly male issue and to try to refocus it on females instead. It's really a dirty tactic.
You know, because, you know what? Because fuck toxic masculinity, which creates that, by the way. Mm. You know, it's why do men's rights activists think this is happening? I mean, they just go and it's like, oh, well, you know, men have it worse. Men have, like, higher suicide rates. It's like, yeah, why do you think that is, Chet? I mean...
Why do you think that is? Because we don't talk about that, of course, right? You know, maybe if you spend a little bit of time actually watching the Red Pill movie, you would know that we actually do. Or actually talking to, you know, MRAs. Just a word of advice. Maybe you should try that before asking such questions. Now, whenever a man is divorced and loses his kids and family, we see a spike in the suicide rate. Interesting, that, isn't it? Do you think it might have something to do with losing his kids? You know, that thing that you dismissed earlier? Nah, that's probably just a coincidence, right? And I've often speculated, considering male victims of domestic abuse have next to no resources. In many places, no resources whatsoever. And they're often not believed by friends and family and society and even the police. Taking all those things into consideration, I think that might also be one of the reasons for the high male suicide rate, when someone's trapped with no other way out.
I was ostracised from family and friends. I was constantly told that even my own family didn't want anything to do with me because I was mentally ill. I just turned around and I looked to see if there was a truck coming down the road because I would have just jumped in front of that truck. A lot of shame. There was a lot of numbness. I went through a lot of depression. Rang up the Department of Community Services. And I was told by a woman on the end of the phone, sorry, I don't believe you because only men abuse women. You don't fit into any AA programs, we need you to do an anger management course. And I said, my ex spat at me, she threatened me with knives, she bit me, she punched me, she withheld money, she verbally abused me, and you're telling me I need to do an anger management course.
And it's also the fact that society doesn't really want to listen to or discuss men's issues. Once again, shutting down the Red Pill movie is a perfect example of that. When men can't talk about their issues without being told that they're misogynists or that they just want to get women back in the kitchen and go back to the 1950s or all this other bullshit that we constantly hear. When our issues are just dismissed and we're told that they don't really count, you shouldn't be surprised that there's a high male suicide rate. But, you know, I guess it's just easy to live in an echo chamber and shout toxic masculinity at the top of your lungs, right? A lot more simplistic than actually looking at the actual facts.
It's because men aren't told that they can have emotions. I mean, how many guys have you seen just like, you know, lose it because, you know, they can't cry in front of somebody?
I guess the perfect response to this is a clip from Tom Golden. Now, because I've played this clip numerous times before in videos, because it really is a good clip which really answers this particular point that she's making, I'm not going to play it right here and right now. I'll play it after my end credits. So if you haven't seen it, you can watch it there. But if you've watched a lot of my videos and you've seen it 100 times, you won't have to watch it again. But in the meantime, next.
Or, you know, I'll admit something. For the longest time, I was uncomfortable with men crying in front of me. And I would perpetuate these ideas of just like, oh man, just, seriously, have a cup of concrete and harden the fuck up because I can't bear you, like, sitting there crying like a pussy. Words that actually came out of my mouth before, I'd actually thought about what it was that I was saying.
Well. I find that very, very interesting because just 4 minutes ago in their video, she said this.
I really don't. Like, the whole idea that, like, a man can't be, a nurturer is not something that comes out of the mouths of women. If anything, we look for men who,
It's only recently.
So this is very interesting. She says that it's not women's fault, that they actually look for men who are nurturers, and part of being a nurturer is expressing your emotions, obviously. You can't be a good nurturer if you shut off your emotions. So she says it's not women who are forcing these gender stereotypes and restrictions on men. And shortly after that she mentions toxic masculinity. But 4 minutes after making these statements, she says that she herself used to have this attitude, after she just said that women don't have this attitude. So I have to ask, is she the only woman in existence who has had this attitude? I'm guessing the answer is no, right? So it must be a societal attitude then. Okay, fair enough. Why call it toxic masculinity then? Why put all the blame on men? If this is a stereotype which is forced on men by both men and women, why refer to it as toxic masculinity? Why say that women take no responsibility and are in no way to blame? Now, let me be clear here, because I don't want someone quote mining me. I'm not suggesting that only women are to blame. I never said that, so please don't take me out of context. I'm saying it is a societal attitude. Both men and women think and feel this way towards men expressing their emotions. And it's something that feminists do on a regular fucking basis to MRAs. Whenever we try to talk about men's issues, they try to shut us down by calling us whining, crying man babies. It's a very, very common response. And I don't think most of them even realise what they're doing. On one hand, they say, yeah, men should be able to express their opinions and their emotions, and, they should be able to cry in public. And when we try to talk about our issues, they put us down and call us names and try to shut us down any fucking way they can. Yet, for some reason, don't see any double standard or any contradiction. It's a societal attitude. It needs to change, I agree. Feminism and blaming toxic masculinity is not the way to do that.
When I was young and stupid, like everybody has that moment, and
it just goes back to these ideas that we get taught in childhood, and so a lot of this is just about digging deeper. It's not just about getting cranky and choosing one side. It's not about that. It's just like Bunny was saying, we wonder why men don't cry in pub. I'm not saying generally. I'm just saying if you observe that that's predominantly what you see. Why is that? What institutions are in place that make that exactly.
Once again, I'm going to refer to the Tom Golden clip at the end after my credits, because I think Tom really sums it up perfectly. In the meantime, let's continue.
So this is that. So this is the entire point. It's about exploring and coming to a common truth, not just about cooking up theories. I mean a lot.
Cooking up theories. You mean like patriarchy theory? Maybe a little bit of toxic masculinity thrown in there? Maybe rape culture? You mean those type of theories? No, of course you don't. Of course you don't. They're okay in your opinion.
A lot of sociological work you know, unfortunately has to, you know, it has to be categorized in theory, but it's a working basis,
and you can apply
know?
it to things. Like, if I may just talk about one of my faves, and you know exactly who I'm going to talk about, Daddy Foucault.
Oh yes,
Michel Foucault. I'm so sorry to anyone who's French and listening to me like murder that.
Okay, so they ramble on a little bit here, and I'm just going to cut it out for time and relevancy. I just want to skip ahead a bit to where they're talking about the red pill and MRAs again. So if you want to know what they're talking about, take note of the timestamps, and you can go and watch their original podcast. Link, as always, below.
So getting back on track though.
Yes.
Yeah, so all these natural laws, right? So things like, you know, men aren't supposed to cry, or men are, you know, that this old chestnut. How about this one? You know, men are more rational and less emotional, seen as a natural law. And let us just, do you want to like just break that one down for us a little bit? Because, you know, as far as I knew, we're all human, and all human beings have emotions.
Okay, so we've already established that men are less likely to express their emotions publicly, right? They stated this earlier, so that shouldn't be controversial, and they shouldn't disagree with me on that because it's something they themselves stated. So if you have a group of people who are less likely to express their emotions publicly, then should it be surprising that they appear to be more rational and relying on logic more than emotion? Now, obviously, this comes down to the individual. Not all men and not all women are the same. You can have very logical women and very emotional men, and each individual is a complex mix of the two. But generally speaking, societal expectations on men is to shut down their emotions and get on with the job. And when you have this type of expectation put on a group of people, they will appear less emotional and more rational. It's really that simplistic. And once again, Tom Golden, after my credits. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you watch it. Next.
You know, so, and that was seen as a natural law, that just, you know, women are like, you know, always clutching at their pearls and like, oh no, I could never, I'm so weak, and oh, I'm just gonna have a cry because I've got emotions and I can't control. And therefore, of course, that was the whole basis for why they said women couldn't have the vote or anything. You
do realise that most men also didn't have the vote at that same time, right? Of course you don't realise that. Yeah, the vote was based on property ownership, basically, and this included a small group of women who also had the vote because they were property owners in some cases. Most men did not fall in that category, though, so they also did not have the vote.
And if a woman wasn't like that, well, then she was clearly like a man and therefore dangerous for some reason.
So if a woman was seen like a man, she was seen as dangerous. So does that mean that men were seen as dangerous?
So it's all based, so biopower, just to wrap that point up, I haven't forgotten. So biopower basically is this whole idea that we're being sovereign, we self-sovereign, we self-discipline and self-police ourselves to go with whatever these natural laws have been defined to be by institutions and lawmakers in the state. And there are various reasons for why that came about, but one of the things is basically that so we can, you know, perpetuate, now I'm not going to go into like, you know, communist theory and everything at this point, but it is so that, you know, we can become better producers and consumers. And that's a different podcast for a different day.
Yeah. What I will add, just to finish off on biopower, because I think this is very important. So I suppose another key factor. Now you spoke about production and reproduction, especially now in a capitalistic society. We mustn't forget that. As women, our reproductive rights are always being challenged, and this is very central to the ideas of feminism and the things that the MRI are afraid of. It is this you know, this ability for us to, you know, to control our bodies, you know.
Really? So MRAs are afraid of women having the rights to control their bodies. That's a very interesting statement. I'd love to see some evidence for that. Can you show that the mainstream men's rights movement is against abortion or women controlling their reproductive rights? Now, no doubt you'll be able to find some MRAs who believe that, and I tell you what, I can find some feminists who believe that too. But for you to make the argument that this is a mainstream MRA belief, I'd like to see some evidence, please. It better be fucking good evidence too. Because it sounds like to me you're just saying anyone who disagrees with feminism is automatically an MRA, which shows how fucking ignorant you are and how you haven't done any research. Once again, this shit is offensive. You have no right to call yourselves critical thinkers.
You know, that it's going to cause chaos. That it's,
no more babies are going to be born.
No more babies, no more society. We're all going to run amok. Yet women choose to not have children, and we're doing just fine. You know, we're still having babies. I certainly did. It didn't stop me. You know, and
but just because you're a feminist doesn't mean you don't want to pop one out. I'm sorry, but that's
right
how it goes. I mean, so
what does any of that have to do with the men's rights movement? Serious question. That bullshit you just went on about, how is that connected to the men's rights movement in any way whatsoever?
You know, and I feel like as much as there's like this, you know, thought of that a feminist is like this ugly butch woman who just hates on men, I think there's also this idea that all MRAs are like, you know, basement dwelling neckbeards. And
geeks.
That's offensive to me as a geek. I am sorry.
That was quoting from Daria.
Of course.
Geek. I say what Stacey would say.
Oh yes, what Stacey would say. But
if she saw the MRA, it'd be geek.
But you know, like the fedora wearing neckbeards and all that, and like
I can't stand fedoras. So.
but that's the side note. You know, just seeing as how we see these men like that, and they're not though. Like a lot of these guys are genuinely concerned about, you know, the rights that men have. And
okay, credit where credit is due. This is a little bit more positive, but the fact that she says a lot of these men aren't like that would suggest that some of us are. Which would mean that some of us are actually basement-dwelling fedora wearers. But yeah, I'm nitpicking. She's trying to make the point here that, you know, we don't all fit the stereotype. I would argue that no actual MRA fits the feminist stereotype, the common stereotype that we see, and that's often used as a straw fedora, a straw man, which the feminists then attack. But I'll let her continue and see if she makes a good point or fucks up here. This will be interesting.
Workplace fatalities and high-risk jobs and, you know, maybe being drafted into the next war the minute it, you know, they run out of cannon fodder. You know what I mean? Like, and also, there are these guys also where it's like, oh, well, you know, men's domestic violence issues never get raised, or also things like, you know, more men are beaten up, and, you know, also things about, you know, they worry about divorce. Like, I know many divorced fathers, you know, who legit worry about their kids and their access to their kids, and get very hurt by the fact that their exes are, you know, depriving them of seeing their kids for nothing other than just being petty. But, you know, however, I think what...
Oh, she was doing so well then. I have to actually give her credit for what she's just said there. But then she came out with but, and I suspect she's going to stuff it up. I don't know. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful she's not going to say something really stupid here. I haven't actually heard what she's about to say, so I can't say. It's exciting though. Is she going to fuck it all up, or is she going to say something smart? I'm taking bets at this point.
These guys are like, you know, they all start out all right with these ideas, but then at the end they just blame it on women and like,
my head, I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain.
She just had to fuck it up, didn't she? She just could not help herself. She was doing so well there for a minute and then just had to resort to the fucking blame it all on the women's straw man. Which is ironic when you think about it. It's really ironic considering feminism blames all the world's woes on men. This is what I call the mirror effect.
I feel, as I've said, I think now 3 times, that they're not seeing that it's actually the way that our society works that perpetuates these ideas. And so instead of fighting against feminists, you know, maybe, just maybe, they should be fighting with us to break down these archaic rules for our society. Like, you know, if a woman wants to go into the front lines in a military situation, you know what? Maybe she should be able to.
Okay, a couple of things here. First of all, as I've already stated, it's not as simple as just working with feminists. They're the ones which are constantly diminishing our issues, saying they don't exist, or they're not as important, or spreading lies and propaganda about us, or shutting us down any way they can. It's not like, you know, these pure, innocent feminists are out there just trying to bring equality to women, and the evil MRAs come along and shit all over them. There's good reason why the vast majority of MRAs are also anti-feminists. Feminists create anti-feminists by their actions and by their beliefs. And blaming everything on men is not going to help men. Now, I don't think feminism is the cause of the male suicide rate, but definitely blaming all the world's woes on men in general and on masculinity, and saying that masculinity is somehow toxic and faulty isn't going to help the male suicide epidemic, is it? It's just going to add to it. Now, as for women on the front line, I have no problem with women on the front line if they can meet the requirements. I've never had an issue with that. If a woman can meet the requirements to be on the front line or to be a firefighter or whatever, I've got no issue with her doing the job. I do have an issue, though, if those standards are lowered to try to get an equal number of women in, because those standards are there for a reason. And also, our point isn't that women should or shouldn't be allowed on the front line. It's the fact that there is a draft for men in America which isn't for women. Now, obviously, not every man in the draft is going to go on the front line, nor does every woman in a draft need to go to the front line if women were included. There are lots of other jobs they could do in the military. Personally, I think it'd be better to get rid of the draft entirely, but if there is one, it should be equal.
Why not? Or, you know, the reason why there's not a lot of services for male victims of domestic violence is perhaps, and rape of course, is perhaps maybe because if a man says that, you know, he was abused or raped, other men laugh at him.
Oh, I see. It's men doing it to men. It's not society in general. It's never feminists or women denying that men can be victims of sexual assault or domestic violence, right? Feminists never do that, especially the female ones, right? What a fucking joke.
I mean, that's
use homophobic slurs.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to fear, and it's even taking into intersectionality here. Imagine if it's a man that gets raped and he's gay, and he can't maybe reveal it to his family. So it's like, where is this person supposed to go? Actually, one thing I didn't get to find out that I'd like to sort of get into, I had a little bit of trouble, is I don't know what the MRA stance is for for homosexual men. I don't know if they're supportive of them or if they're anti. I would dare say that if they are predominantly of a heteronormative persuasion, then I would definitely say that they've got a strictly straight white man agenda going.
My head, I'd be scratching while my thoughts were busy hatching if I only had a brain.
Well, if you don't know something, you just fall back on stereotypes, apparently, correct? That's at least going by these two. Now, here's a clip of Paul Elam responding to something that Michael Kimmel said in the Red Pill movie.
Whatever mechanisms in the mind of Michael Kimmel are employed to accomplish these Olympic-level mental gymnastics, I am personally quite sure that some level of sociopathy is required. We see it again in Kimmel's offhand assessment of where he imagines the sources of anger that MRAs feel may be found.
They're really angry, and they're angry at women, they're angry at feminist women, but yes, men have gotten a crappy deal. But it's not the fault of women or gay people.
And yet again, Kimmel shows his willingness to forcefully mold reality to fit an agenda. The MRM has been the only platform in history so far to offer gay men a refuge who don't want to be walked like poodles by feminists and used for their political value, to stand alongside their straight brothers against the misandry that affects all of us. Kimmel claims he checked out A Voice for Men after we so steadfastly denounced his work, perhaps not closely enough to see all the gay and bisexual male writers. He likely missed the book by Matthew Lai in the sidebar, The New Gay Liberation, Escaping the Fag End of Feminism. It's a short, brutally honest read about the long-standing hatred of gay men in the feminist movement. Maybe Kimmel didn't even notice when GLBT became LGBT, and how the perception of gay men as privileged by feminists drove that change in the jargon.
Yeah, which is can't respect gays because they're like women, which comes back to that whole natural law thing that I was talking about, which is very Foucauldian. And, sometimes I think, it's, I find it difficult to see whether or not MRAs, I think for the most part, they're just really disenfranchised, guys who aren't seeing much help anywhere because of the way our society works. We tend to not help men, which is, by the way, something that feminists worldwide say is definitely a thing that we should be doing, supporting men.
Which ones? Which feminists are those? Because I don't think I've met too many of them. Most of the feminists I've met don't want to talk about men's issues unless they can dismiss them as being less important or non-existent. Now, look, sure, I will grant you I have met some good feminists. I'm even friends with some good feminists who actually are concerned about men and men's issues. I will grant you that, but they are not the mainstream. They are not the academics in university. They are not the ones that have influence on the government. They are not the ones which are working in the media. And they're definitely not the leaders of the movement.
Because, they're the ones, they share this earth with us. We can't, just hate on half a population.
So I think it is very important. I probably should have mentioned in the beginning when we were discussing the misconceptions of feminism. I think it's very important to point out that what feminism actually is, it's the idea, and I'm talking back in the day, going back towards first and second wave. It's the whole idea that a woman can stand up for herself and advocate for equal rights, and so and that's talking, men's and women's rights. It's about reaching equality. So it's actually got nothing to do with, nothing in that definition says women only, or that we become a huge, massive Amazonian tribe. It's
sorry,
or that we become Wonder Woman or whatever. It's nothing to do with that.
No.
It's just it's just simply the fact that for that first and second wave, women had to pick themselves out. And again, this is why history is important. I think a lot of people forget how that movement first started. Women had to go and protest on their own. On live TV, the news anchors and all that. I know I'm using the Americanized word. Were just making fun of women in TV. They were laughing at the movement, saying, "Oh, they should go back in the kitchen." You can
still say, by the way, it's not funny.
Yeah,
it's so old.
And a lot of this can be looked up on YouTube. It's I wish it was a joke. I wish that it was fabricated, but it's not.
No, and see, this is and here's the thing, right? Like, we're just talking about feminism generally and the men's rights movement generally. But like the effect that it actually has, I think if you sit back and you analyze your whole life after doing some reading or even just some quick research on people like Foucault or Judith Butler, who's amazing, by the way.
Who I did my research recently on Donna Haraway. If you guys get a chance to read A Cyborg Manifesto, if you've got to start off with any kind of feminism, start off with her. She considers her, I don't know if she still considers, I think she still considers herself a socialist feminism, a social feminist, which is, again, it roots back to that definition that I mentioned in her work. Just in a quick nutshell, it's she uses the cyborg metaphor, as a way that we may be able to break down all these, dualisms in our society. So, man versus women, adult versus child, human versus animal, human versus machine. So just breaking down all these stereotypes, all these preconceived notions, all these archaic ideas, and that we bind together, so that we go to we use affinity as a means of uniting as the human race together towards a progressive future. So that is her
really
vision.
Good starting point. Yeah.
And on that note, I think I'll end the video here. I do think I will do a third one though. I'm curious about what they're going to say next. When I started this, I didn't think I'd be doing 3 videos, but now I'm curious. Now I'm wondering what exactly they're going to say next, and I'm curious what they're going to say about some of the people who have appeared in the Red Pill and what they think of them. So look out for a part 3 sometime in the near future.
But it's out there, and it took me about 30 years to figure it out. And I'm going to summarize in about 30 seconds what it took me 30 years to figure out. And that is this. In general, men will tend to heal themselves through an action or an inaction, pulling back and being quiet, that uses honoring and pulls them into the future. I'll say that again. Men will tend to use action or inaction and honoring within those two things to pull them into the future. And through that, what do? They heal. Now, you can see why that really was unseeable at the time, because our culture pretends that the only way to heal is through what? Talking about it and crying, right? Oh my gosh. I got out of grad school, right? I go to work, I sit down with these guys, and I make good eye contact, just like they taught me in grad school, right? You make good eye contact. Do men like eye contact? No, not in the same way as women like eye contact. With the women clients I'd have, it was great. I could tell they relaxed, they felt close. But with the men, I felt like I was making them nervous. And of course, now I know what's happening. You know, men with another man, eye contact does not mean connection and intimacy. It means something else. What does it mean? Challenge. It means put them up. Hockey has a face-off. Boxers face each other, right? This is a challenge. This is not something that's going to make him feel safe and like, oh, now I can talk about the past. No. Hell no. You know, what I found out, of course, since then was the honoring and action, but men do it shoulder to shoulder. They're much more likely to do something shoulder to shoulder with each other. Men will sit in a fishing boat all day, shoulder to shoulder. They'll leave that fishing boat after the day. They'll feel close to that guy. But they didn't say one word. Words are not that critical. It's something else that's critical to men. In fact, sometimes I think, you know, that this masculine way of intimacy, of being close through just being with, is really in some ways more developed than just a lot of talk. But that's my bias. Maybe it's not yours. Anyway. It is? So I got the message that, you know, men were not such good things because they couldn't deal with their feelings so much. And it took me this 30 years to come and tell you what I just told you, and we're going to talk about the different ways they do that later on. But the first thing I want to talk about is, why could I not see it at the time? Why could I not see the way these men were healing? What was it that blinded me, and what was it that made it invisible so we couldn't see the men's pain? And the very first thing is, a man's pain is taboo. A man's pain is taboo. You've heard speakers all day today talk about that in certain ways, but a man's pain is taboo. No one wants to touch it. No one wants to hear it. And men are not dumb. They know that. So what are they going to do? Go emote in public? No. They know their pain is taboo. Now, let's do an exercise. I want you to imagine that you're walking into your favorite restaurant. You're walking in your favorite restaurant, you're walking in to get seated, you're thinking, and you look over in the corner, at the corner table, there's a woman. She's crying. What's the first thing you think about with her? Anybody? What's wrong? Poor dear, she's upset, right? I've asked this question to thousands of therapists in the workshops I give. I'm telling you, they all say the same thing. Poor dear, she must have just broken up with someone. She needs support. How can I help, right? Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Erase that image. Go back, you're walking into the same restaurant. You're walking by and you notice over in that corner table there's a guy and he's crying. What's your first reaction? Get away. Wimp. What else? Drunk. Exactly. This is what I hear over and over again. People immediately come up with that. I came up with that and I was working with them. You know? This is not something that is just a couple of people. This is almost all of us have this bias that's built in that says, man's pain, get away. There's something wrong with that guy. He's probably drunk, you know? So we're all built to not want to get close to men's pain. Men know this. They know it. They know no one wants to hear this crap. In fact, the guys I'd sit with, they'd look at me and they'd say, do you really want to hear this? They couldn't believe that someone would want to listen to their pain. It's sad. So the first thing that tipped me off was that men's pain is invisible because a man's pain is taboo. Now there's another one. The provide and protect rule. Oh boy. So you provide and protect people. Well, guess what? Who's providing and protecting for you? Nobody. Nobody's providing and protecting. Think about, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you and your wife wake up, there's a big noise down in the basement. Boom, something goes. Who's going down to check it out?
Not me.
That's a woman said that. Who's going down to check it out? Guess what? In today's world, women may very well say, I'll go down and check that out. And if she did that, she'd be a hero, right? But women's roles are very flexible these days. She'd not only be a hero, but if she said, honey, I really don't want to do that. Can you go? It'd be fine. Nobody get upset, right? There's no problem. Now, how about the guy? If he goes down and checks it out, he's doing his job. Right? That's what he's supposed to do. He is the guy. But if he says, no, honey, I don't want to go, he's a jackass. Can you see the double standard that's going on? Men are expected to never be dependent. Never be dependent. And guess what? You can't emote and not be dependent. The two are linked. They're linked up. So men strive to not be dependent for good reasons, because the culture whips them into that. There's a guy named Peter Merritt. He wrote this beautiful piece on homelessness and men. But one of the things in the piece stuck with me. And he talked about men and dependency. Listen to what he says. To put it simply, men are neither supposed nor allowed to be dependent. Men are not supposed to be or allowed to be dependent. They're expected to take care of others and themselves. And when they cannot or will not do it, then the assumption at the heart of the culture is that they are somehow less than men and therefore unworthy of help. Get it? An irony asserts itself. By being in need of help, men forfeit the right to it. Does that make sense? A guy comes out and he says, I don't need that help. I'm fine. I'm a man, right? Hey, no problem. He doesn't get the help. But if a guy comes out and he says, you know, I really need some help today, people automatically have a view of him. There's something wrong with that guy, right? He doesn't deserve this help. It's a very powerful double standard that goes on for men that keeps them, again, from wanting to emote in public, wanting to bring it out so people can see it. Very different. Now,
you know, I'll admit something. For the longest time, I was uncomfortable with men crying in front of me. And I would perpetuate these ideas of just like, oh man, just, you know, seriously, have a cup of concrete and harden the fuck up, because I can't bear you like sitting there crying like a pussy. Words that actually came out of my mouth before, you know, I actually thought about what it was that I was saying.